Pro. Pro this, pro that, pro controller, pro console, pro guitarist, pro violinist, pro chef, pro footballer, pro mom, pro dad, pro truth these. Alright, let me stop right there. You get the deal. What is it about consoles that they just can't come out already with all these features and whatnot already right out of the factory? These act like human babies. They come out of the factory not knowing how to do anything. It feels like every few years into a console's lifespan, video game companies say, hey, money, yeah, let's make more of it. And let's trick people into giving us more of it. Every pro iteration of a console has always included an upgrade here and there. Some are more aesthetic upgrades than anything, such as the PS1, Xbox 360S, and the PlayStation Slim models. However, in recent years, there's been iterations of pro consoles hitting the market left and right. You hear rumors of a Switch Pro and how you'll be able to play 4K games on the go. Yeah, okay man, if you believe that, I'm gonna need you to come here real quick and recite your social security number to me. Famously, we have the PS4 Pro, which flaunts an upgraded GPU and processing power that gives the players the ability to play a lot of games in 4K graphics. Or how about the Xbox One X, which also gives its players the ability to play games in high fidelity 4K. Wanna bet how many households actually have 4K TVs? At the end of the day, it all boils down to marketing. Don't get me wrong, higher fidelity in video games is a huge upgrade, but at the end of the day, for what purpose do pro versions exist? I mean, don't video game companies end up alienating their user base by splitting them up by what kind of console they can afford? And furthermore, doesn't this confuse and make developers' jobs more difficult when all they're really trying to do is for players to have the same experience when playing their games? Or is it all a gimmick used to sell more systems to people and thus end up giving video game companies more money? Yes. The answer to all these previous questions is absolutely, without a doubt, yes. Look, in my opinion, there's no actual benefit to higher resolutions in video games. I mean, sure, games look prettier, but when you have the Switch on its way to outsell the PS4, you have to wonder whether people actually care that much about graphics. The current mainline Switch version can output resolutions up to 1080p and frame rates of 60 FPS. And even then, the games running at those specs have huge downgrades in graphics. Is portability then more important than graphics? If so, then why do people go out of their way to buy a PS4? I mean, obviously besides the exclusives. Is it just for the 4K resolutions? So maybe graphics are kind of a selling point for a lot of people. You know what? Maybe these people are just buying the PS4 Pro for the processing power. Higher processing power can mean a smoother gameplay experience after all. But let's take a step back and see when the trend of releasing pro consoles kind of became a thing. Way back in the day. I mean, boy, way back when I was a little kid, we didn't used to get pro versions. You know what we used to get? Disappointment in the form of the Game Boy Color. Hardware upgrades actually used to be completely different consoles. One generation of a console was entirely different from the other. For example, the main upgrade between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, well, color. Main upgrade from Game Boy Color to Game Boy Advance, the bits. The Color was an 8-bit system while the Advance was a 32-bit system. I mean, this is a huge graphics upgrade. However, it was around this time that consoles kind of began to do what I call superficial upgrades. These were upgrades dressed as revisions. For example, the Game Boy Advance SP added a backlight, and the Game Boy Micro took away all the previous features? Huh? The Micro couldn't actually play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games like its predecessor. It didn't have any backwards compatibility. So why even release it? Why even create this thing? I mean, what's the purpose of it? I mean, sure, you can argue that portability is an upgrade in itself, but the SP is already pocket sized. I guess the Micro has better skin designs, but like, why? This trickery then translated to other consoles using the term revisions as an excuse to upgrade their consoles every few years or so. PlayStation has always been one of the worst offenders of releasing an updated version of their consoles later on, with either features taken off of it or just making them smaller and slimmer. Back in 2000, the PlayStation 1 got an iteration in the form of the PS1. This was a smaller, redesigned version of the original PlayStation. However, the PS1 model did take a lot off of its original console. For example, a big negative on the PS1 was the removal of the reset button. The console could not be reset without entirely turning it off. The PlayStation 2 also had a second life in the form of the PS2 Slim. The PS2 Slim was released in 2004, 4 years later from the original PlayStation 2. However, the PlayStation 2 Slim was actually received with fairly positive reviews, especially because of the huge slimming down of the console and also the built-in networking connections it had. The most famous case of this was the PS3 and their absolutely incorrect use of the term slim. The slim version of the PS3 wasn't actually that slim, but it did boast a better power usage. Whatever that translates to besides a lower electricity bill and less fan noise is up to debate. And then came the PS4 Slim, which boasted absolutely nothing. I'm kidding, of course, kinda. It is 40% smaller, and the light bar, this little thing on the controller, is now visible from the touchpad. Can we really call this an upgrade? But what if we look at this phenomenon of pro consoles from a very fundamental perspective? Do pro versions sell better than standard options? I mean, not necessarily. Just based off price tag and the later dates that they're released at, these consoles are mostly aimed at dedicated fans of the console. So they're more expensive and they're released years after the general public has had an opportunity to buy the standard hardware. So why release them? What is the purpose behind releasing something that not a lot of people are gonna buy? Because the psychology of choice. Studies and research have proven that when people are presented with options, they tend to choose the safe or the more balanced option. If a person with no knowledge of video game consoles, let's say for example a parent buying a console for their child, this person is gonna go for the console with the most features. Why? Well, because they don't want to disappoint their child, or they probably feel like they'll be missing out if they don't buy the pro version. On the other hand, someone with knowledge on video game consoles will look at the PS4 Pro and they'll maybe think, I don't think 4K is necessary. I don't even have a 4K TV. If I go with the standard version, I can still play all of the console's library and put some of that extra money for a game or two. It's a win-win. Sony doesn't necessarily put out a pro console because they want to give you an option. They create these pro versions just for you to commit on a console and finally buying it. They're just closing a sale. Psychology of choices is a very complex but somewhat easy to understand concept, and you can see how it's applied to pro consoles. These new iterations coming out every few years have made it easier and more accessible for people to buy these consoles. Nowadays, getting a pro version doesn't make a lot of sense when you've already bought the base model. You're already getting kind of the same experience. One thing is for certain though, these iterations push the technology of gaming forward and give video game companies a great way to test what people expect of next generation consoles. Think of pro consoles as a taste for what's to come. It's a great way to test what works and what doesn't work for the next gen. Now, will I ever buy a pro console? Probably not. I got rent. But What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below if you think that pro consoles are actually a good investment, or do you think just the standard version of any console does suffice for every single gamer out there? Ladies and gentlemen, I've been True Fernie. If you liked this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs down. Every bit helps. Links to my socials are down below. I recently started a second channel where I upload playthroughs and VODs of my Twitch channel. Everything is linked down below. And with that, please take care of each other, but most importantly, take care of yourself. Peace.